Let's get this out of the way right up front. This layout, created by Norm Charbonneau, is the most realistic we've ever seen. We've seen other high rail layouts that were bigger and as finely detailed. But what tips the realism meter in Norm's favor is the weathering. The legendary John Allen set the bar in HO. Now Norm has set the bar in O gauge. Norm is a true modeler, a dedicated and skilled craftsman who has created a museum-quality layout. Wait a minute. We've seen layouts in museums. Norm's is better than museum quality. You can tell museums if they want to build a layout, they can aspire to Norm quality. His basic ingredients are the same as they are for any layout: trains, buildings, and scenery. But it is the weathering effect Norm has applied to each of these ingredients that sets his layout far apart. The only weathering we've seen is on some HO layouts, and we didn't pay much attention. The O-gauge layout builders we've met would never dream of spraying paint on their new cars and engines. Norm is the exception. He weathers everything: rolling stock, buildings, even $1,700 locomotives.
Weathering is such a fun aspect, and it definitely brings out the nice details, and it tends to hide the lesser details on these engines. But I don't worry about devaluing them at all. I mean, in fact, I feel I add to the value for myself personally, because I think they look better, they sit right, they blend into the scenery. You know, they look like they've been in this environment doing the hard work that they were built to do.
Most of the structures are based on real buildings Norm has seen on his travels. When he sees a building he likes, he photographs it.
The influences for the buildings came from places I've lived or places I've seen that I've really liked. A lot of the scenery is, the industrial scenery is influenced by Pittsburgh and New England and Detroit. Some of the buildings, like the terminal warehouse, is based on one that still stands in Toledo. I built it from photographs and kind of altered it to fit in the space that I had for it. The building next to it is kind of, it's kind of a composite of a building that still stands in Detroit, the old C.R. Wilson carriage factory. I had some photographs of it and thought if I could capture that section of the building, it would make a good backdrop for trains rolling by. So.
As good as everything looks, Norm is always improving.
Currently, right now, I'm going through and replacing some of my older buildings that I don't think are really up to par anymore.
The turntable is a Bowser 30-inch, controlled by Trainmaster Command Control using the receiver, motherboard, and motor driver from a K-line engine. Norm used no indexing. The tracks are lined up by eye. The roundhouse is a Corber kit on a plywood base done up to represent old concrete. The whole engine facility was freelanced to represent a light-duty steam-era engine storage and service facility. Norm Scratch built the impressive coal station using a Grand Trunk Railroad prototype that still stands in Durand, Michigan. It is scratch built out of masonite and MDF. MDF stands for medium density fiberboard. It's like a thick masonite. Model and cabinet makers use it a lot. The Pagoda Switch Tower is a plaster kit by Model Tech Studios. Norm added a custom MDF base and extra detailing. Most of the buildings have illumination, but Norm keeps the lights off because he thinks the buildings look more realistic without light.
I shied away from unnatural lighting techniques that are commonly used on train layouts where you know, you've got bright shining lights through windows in broad daylight, you know. Operating accessories, I've kind of, you know, I've got my turntable, and really here the main attraction is just the trains and the scenery and the sounds and sometimes the smoke, you know.
Norm likes artista figures. The vehicles are Corgi, Tamiya, and Berkshire Valley, along with a Lionel steam shovel kit. The junk pile near the roundhouse is by Model Tech Studios, with additional junk box parts sprinkled in. The steel water tower by the roundhouse is a Walters kit. The trees, stonework, rocks, mountains, the way the greenery is blended in, it all looks very real.
These are Scenic Express super trees, you know, you buy them in the bag. And I also have some super sages mixed in here and there. They're pretty nice product, real easy to use. You just grab a bunch and spray paint them flat black, and I dip them in diluted white glue or carpenter's wood glue, and then just sprinkle fine ground foam and maybe a little bit of flocking on them. And I throw them all in a box, and then as I work on the scenery, I just punch a hole in the scenery and pop them in there. I think they're good, scraggly, industrial-type trees, and then they lend themselves to populating the mountains and the hillsides. They give you a good sense of, you know, you can build a pretty reasonable forest in a quick amount of time. The mountain section is probably the first part of the layout I built, and it actually, if you measured its height, it's actually a little lower than the city scenery, which is kind of funny, but it wasn't intentional, and it just worked out that way. But if you stand in certain places, it sort of gives you a little bit of a forced perspective. They seem a little more distant, but that was the first section of the layout I built, and some parts of it are only about like an inch deep. Some of the background hill are just the hills are just masonite templates with ground foam sprinkled on them, and then some of the closer stuff is comprised of hand-carved plaster of Paris rocks. I chose to build a cut through here as opposed to a series of tunnels, just to kind of give you just to open up the space and so you could still see the trains too, or at least parts of them negotiating their way through the scenery. And to me, it kind of gives the feel of a mountain cut with a slight grade on the one side. These mountains here were built in 2 5-foot sections in my workshop, and then brought out and placed on the layout, and then the final scenery was done here. There's actually a seam that's hidden by the coaling tower between the two pieces. It's a combination of hard shell and plaster cloth over pink foam. landscapes. I definitely wanted the scenery to complement the trains, and the way to do that was to build more scale-oriented scenery, more realistic scenery, and just to create an environment to operate the trains I enjoyed running. I primarily buy this stuff to run, and I've chosen to weather the engines I feel that match the scenery the best, so that'd be a lot of the Pennsylvania and New York Central models. I figure once I bought it, you know, it's mine to do whatever I want with, and weathering is such a fun aspect, and it definitely brings out the nice details, and it tends to hide the lesser details on these engines.
Y628, please go to restricted speed. Over. Roger that. Moving to restricted speed. Out. Easy does it. Yeah. Big hook. Careful. Okay. Swinging left. Watch those hooks, guys.
Norm operates locomotives from the late 30s and early 40s.
I have a couple of Lionel M1As. They were the special introductions from several years ago. One was completely modified with Train America EOB and a puff and chuff board. I hopped up the smoke unit a little bit, and of course it's weathered, and I actually changed a cab number. And the other one I run quite a bit is pretty much stock except for the weathering and the addition of a puff and chuff board. We also ran the J1A, which was introduced around the same time. Lionel, another model they did a great job on.